Hello and welcome to the Slam Jam Wrestling Show here on the Slam Jam Wrestling Show YouTube channel, as well as on the Extreme Improv Extremes YouTube channel. Now today it's just me, guys. I finally did it. I have eliminated all of the competition. We had a over the top rope throwdown battle royale, and I have emerged as the sole survivor. No, none of the other guys were available tonight. They've got things on, so you just have myself. I am David Postansky. I always forget to introduce myself, and we're going to be reacting to the Elimination Chamber. We're going to be reacting to WWE Raw. We're going to be reacting to AEW Dynamite and all kinds of other things that are happening in the world of professional wrestling within the last 7 days. Now, it's been an interesting one just because the biggest thing has been the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view from the WWE. Now, just because it is just me tonight, I am going to be looking around and a little bit distracted, and that will be because I'm just trying to make sure that I've got all of the facts, all of the breaking news, because I have no one else to bounce off of, and so it's going to be a little bit scatterbrained, but we're going to have a good old time with it as well. So the Elimination Chamber was on Saturday. Like, pay-per-views this day and age we're in, they seem to run on a Saturday, which I'm still not quite used to. It is genuinely, I think, better. Like a Saturday night pay-per-view, it means that, like, because in the UK it would always be, oh, it's Sunday night, you're up until like 4 a.m. on Monday morning, and then wherever you're going, if you like, when I was a kid, going to school, college, going to work, got a job, any of this kind of stuff, it would just be like you'd feel like hell the next day, but you have to see the pay-per-view before you read the spoilers, before anyone else on the internet, even in the primitive days of the internet, would give out those spoilers. But let's react to what there was in terms of the matches. First of all, we had the Elimination Chamber match, because it was the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view for the Raw Women's Championship, for who will get a match at WrestleMania 39. It wasn't for the actual title, but we had Asuka defeating Carmella, Liv Morgan, Natalya, Nikki Cross, and Raquel Rodriguez. It was a good match. A great way to open the show. They bookended the whole pay-per-view. Well, no, in fact, they didn't. The world title match went on last. What am I talking about? But so the interesting thing I was going to say is that they didn't even have it so that, like, there was one Elimination Chamber match and another, because everything that's going on with Roman and Sammy has been so hot. This is like the Royal Rumble. You'll have Royal Rumble matches, but then the main event is the head of the table at the moment. It is Roman Reigns. And so Oscar, yeah, it was a great match. It was quite short for an Elimination Chamber match. They didn't make it go anywhere near as long as what they did for the men's Elimination Chamber match, which obviously saw Austin Theory defeating and retaining his United States Championship against Damian Priest, Bronson Reed, Johnny Gargano, Montez Ford, and Seth frickin' Rollins. One of the interesting things I read about that match was, and I read this, I didn't remember it, but apparently I read today that apparently Seth has been in 3 Elimination Chamber matches and not eliminated anyone. Or did you hear that? This week I've got like a different thing set up so that I see like a different monitor, and it keeps disconnecting and reconnecting, which isn't ideal. So if you hear this weird disconnecting sound, that will be what that was. But apparently, yeah, Seth has been in 3 Elimination Chamber matches and not eliminated anyone. And apparently that ties with Baron Corbin, who has done the same. The big thing, like, in the match was Montez Ford injured? And apparently he wasn't. It was just kayfabe. He wasn't actually injured. And let's just have a quick look at something here. So just got to sort something out there. That's perfect. Now, he wasn't injured, but they did it just so that they would have the excuse of the cage being open, so Logan Paul could return and obviously cause havoc to set up what he's doing with Seth Rollins. So obviously at WrestleMania, we're going to have Seth versus Logan Paul. Like, the shape of WrestleMania is starting to emerge, but even though Like, when is WrestleMania this year? Let's find out the date of it. Even though it's only a few short weeks away, it still feels like there could still be some changes. Oh, it says the next pay-per-view is Stand and Deliver. I'm gonna have to click through these to get to a WrestleMania. So WrestleMania 39 is officially on April 1st and April 2nd, 2023. That's interesting, just in that we have April Fool's Day in there. And I don't know, I've got a sneaking suspicion that WWE are making April Fools of us, and we still may get something in terms of Sami Zayn in the world title picture, or something. We've spoken about this before, that, like, because you've got 2 nights, you've got one world champion that's got both belts. They could have easily done something where Roman defends it both nights in a row. Now, whoever goes second, so assuming that Roman defeats Cody on the first night and then goes against Sami, or assuming that it's the other way around and that Roman defeats Cody the first night and then somehow will go against Sami the second. That may be that I've said the same thing twice. I'm not sure. It'll be like, well, Roman had to fight 2 guys 2 nights, so unless he's beating both of them, it would look like he was the underdog, and he's meant to be the big dog, the head of the table. Now, if it's that Sami won the first night, defeating Roman, and then it was Sami versus Cody the next night, and Cody won, it'll be like, oh, they gave Sami a token championship win at WrestleMania, and then they've just moved it on to Cody. And they could do that if the plan is for Cody Rhodes to take the world championship from Roman Reigns. Why not just have him take it from Sami and have Sami take it from Roman in the first place? Now then, if Cody was to beat Roman the first night, then I don't think people would mind that if Cody won the second night or if Sami won the second night. People probably more want to see Sami Zayn win at WrestleMania. But if Cody then beat Sami, they'd be like, well, at least they gave Sami his WrestleMania main event moment. But it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. If you saw Raw this week, for some reason, Sami coming out and, like, if you remember Raw from last week, or I think it was Raw. It wasn't, I don't believe it was SmackDown. Cody Rhodes and Sami Zayn. And Cody was like, look, if you don't win, I don't want to see you. Or what did he say? It's like, if you win, I don't want to see you until WrestleMania, which made no sense, because obviously if Sami did defeat Roman, the idea that they wouldn't have a face-to-face between last week's Raw and WrestleMania on the 1st of April is crazy. And if he didn't win, and then he can turn up, which he did do, he obviously, might get something more in the future. But they had the whole thing. We'll get back to what happened, went down at Elimination Chamber. Towards the end of the match, we had like interference, we had the Usos getting involved, and we had Jey Uso back, and we kind of had a little bit of history repeating where Jey Uso was like hesitating. Is he going to use the chair to attack Sami under the orders of Roman Reigns, just as Sami wouldn't attack Kevin Owens at the Royal Rumble under the orders once again of Roman Reigns? And this one was interesting just because Roman got into the face of Jey, and they started to reignite all of the tension that has existed there in the past. And they hesitated for so long. And then, so when Sami got up and he went to attack Roman and then hit Jey, which then led to Jey going down, and led to Sami losing the match. That was kind of, it was kind of obvious that that scenario would happen, that then Sami would lose. And Sami losing in Canada after we had like Drew lose at Clash of the Castle in the United Kingdom. Obviously, that was in Wales and he's Scottish, but it's still the UK. And it's just like WWE, like there has been rumors this week that Vince McMahon is back and booking again. And that is very much like a Vince thing to do. That now, obviously, Triple H was, I believe, in control at Clash of the Castle. I think going back then, like that's after when Vince had retired and Triple H was booking. But just either way, just having guys lose on their home turf when you've got like electric crowds cheering for them. It's like, do you give in to that crowd and say, look, this is going to be such an epic moment? And to some degree, I think you should. Now, obviously, Sami Zayn getting this reception that he got in Montreal. The next week, they're not in Montreal. The next month, they're not in Montreal. They'll return to Canada 3 or 4 times maybe in the entire year. And so it's like, well, do you derail everything you've planned with Roman Reigns just because you've got this opportunity in this particular like home country, hometown situation that you had with Sami, or like they had with Drew in the UK? Because look, they haven't. I'm trying to think if they've been back to the UK since. They're obviously coming back for Money in the Bank, and they might have done like a very small show back in like November or something. I can't quite remember. But the whole point was, just because you'd got that crowd there at Clash at the Castle, if they'd given Drew the world title and it derailed all of the plans that they'd got with the bloodline, just because this kind of sums it up, because people have been saying on Twitter, like, why couldn't Sami have won? And what I'd say to you to that is, imagine if Drew had won at Clash at the Castle. What's the storylines they do with Drew after that? So yeah, Roman would have got a rematch. Maybe others in the bloodline would have got like a title opportunity against Drew, and then he'd end up feuding with Sheamus or something like this. We might even get Gunther versus Drew McIntyre, and people would be like, yeah, this is great. And I'm sure they would have done something that was great if Drew had won the world title. But what we wouldn't have got is everything that has come since Clash at the Castle with the bloodline, with Sami Zayn, with Jey Uso, with Jimmy and Jay, and with Paul Heyman and Solo. All of that stuff would have been cut off. Like, you know, they did a good job with everything with Kevin Owens and the bloodline. And just none of that would have happened if Drew had won the world title then. And similarly, if Sami Zayn had won in Montreal, we'd have had this moment that we'd be playing back for years. Like, there are some iconic moments. There are some. 1 second. Oh, hang on. What? Look, now I'm getting messages. Yeah, David has gone all alone in Slam Jams because none of you guys are here. Like, join me on this show. Like, message if you want to join. I will send a link, and you sons of a guns can do a run in. But look, we're keeping this going. Do you remember that episode of Monday Night Raw? Now, there was that episode of Monday Night Raw after there had been like a volcano in Europe, and then no one could fly out. And Triple H was the only guy from Raw that had flown out early, and he was stood in the ring alone. That's me right now. But anyway, I was saying, so if we've had some iconic moments where like someone has won, like obviously Hogan versus Rock, that crowd was electric, and that atmosphere was made by it. Rob Van Dam at One Night Stand, that famous sign, if Cena wins, we riot. We even saw like if Roman wins, we riot in. If Roman wins, we riot. We saw that at a. God, I'm distracted by my phone with these messages now. We saw that at the Elimination Chamber. If Roman wins, we riot. Now, there are some things where it's like, now, if Cena had beaten RVD, then that would have been a bit of a damp squib. If you remember, like again, going back to Clash at the Castle, but like 30 years before that, we had Brett and Bulldog won in the UK, and that was like this moment that they can replay forever. And look, even though it's a Benoit moment, Benoit and then Guerrero coming out, that celebration, some of these celebrations are iconic. When Eddie Guerrero won the world title from Brock, and that celebration, some of these things are iconic, where people really want something and it happens. Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30. Now, if Sami had won, or if Drew had won, we would have had moments like that, and we didn't get them. But what if Sami had won? What would he be doing now? He'd be on Raw. There'd be like a huge celebration. And then he'd go on to WrestleMania to fight Cody. Cody versus Sami Zayn at WrestleMania. I don't think that's quite the match people would look at it and be like, oh yeah, like, so Cody Rhodes, son of Dusty Rhodes, I guess. And oh, he's the American Nightmare, and he's wearing like eagles and red, white, and blue and stuff like that. Okay, he's the all-American guy. Who's the other guy? Kind of looks scruffy, kind of looks pasty. He's not that in shape compared to Roman Reigns. And it's just like when Daniel Bryan was the guy, even though they didn't want him to be the guy, he was the guy at WrestleMania 30. If Sami Zayn was meant to be the guy at this WrestleMania, then on one level, then yeah, they should have done it. But he's not more the guy than Roman Reigns. And Roman Reigns, everything they've done with the bloodline, even though it's been great and Sami has been a huge part of it, it's so much of it is because like Roman has been on such an epic roll with everything he's done. So Roman Reigns in the bloodline, that storyline, Roman doesn't deserve to be knocked out of the world title picture just before WrestleMania. Now, even if they'd found a way so it ends up as a three-way, I think a lot of people will point to the three ways at WrestleMania and say that they don't have the same storyline, they don't have the same potential and essence as like the one-on-one, heated blood feud, everything's getting personal. Because even when you look back, we've had it like WrestleMania 20, WrestleMania 30, WrestleMania 20, Benoit wins the world title. It was his moment where he defeats Triple H. And Shawn Michaels was also in that match. So many people kind of forget that was a triple threat match because the triple threatness of it isn't what was important. And they did it because they didn't have full confidence in Benoit. Daniel Bryan. Now, it's kind of the same thing. They certainly didn't have confidence in Bryan. Otherwise, he'd have been going into Mania as to fight for the world championship, just him. But Batista was there. And Randy Orton was there, and it was going to be Randy Orton versus Batista, and everyone was like, this is such a mistake, they had to put Bryan in. So if they'd been like, well, Cody's there and he wants to win this for Dusty Rhodes, and he wants to win it to prove that Rhodes can be the world champion, and if Roman's there because he's been world champion for like 3 years or 2.5 years, 900 days and counting, it's not quite 3 years, then my gosh, like it's just like, and then Sami Zayn's there, he's the underdog, he's the one that should win. So it's like, so what's Cody? And should they just have looked at the Royal Rumble and said, well, look, we're going to have Sami in the Royal Rumble and wins the Royal Rumble. Then what do you do with Cody? Comes back and reignites his feud with Seth? I mean, you can do, but like Cody coming in from AEW was a huge change in the momentum in the AEW versus WWE war. So before that point, everyone, like so many people, had been like, AEW have got the momentum, AEW are going to catch them up, AEW are going to take over WWE. And then it was like, well, one of the executive vice presidents, the one that literally started everything from All Out with the I'll take that bet that led to All In happening, which was the precursor to AEW, he's lost faith in AEW and is going back to WWE. And Cody's entrance at WrestleMania last year was exactly one of those moments that I was talking about a few minutes ago, where it was just such a big deal. And Cody got injured, and so when Cody comes back, if he's not going to be in the world title picture to like over accelerate the momentum, if he had to like try to build momentum again, he'd not reach the height that he'd got before. And so they had to accelerate him, Royal Rumble win, onto WrestleMania, and he can be a big deal. Now, Cody is in danger that the audience will just be like, we want Sami and we're going to reject anything else. And if that happens, it happens, obviously. But the fans would be foolish to themselves. WWE fans would be foolish if they turn on Cody. Because as we learned in AEW, Cody doesn't want to turn heel. Now, maybe in WWE, Cody won't have a choice. And if they tell him he's turning heel, maybe he'll have to turn heel. But clearly he doesn't want to. And if Cody goes on and wins the world championship, he can hold it until SummerSlam or Survivor Series, or he could lose it before if they really wanted to. And it would still tell the story of Cody Rhodes, and they'll still have a main eventer. But if he fails, if he fumbles, then perhaps he's going to fall back into the mid card, just like Seth, is someone that's gone back for the US title, and Lashley, They didn't give him a long enough stretch as world champion, but then he's going back for the US title. It's like, you're not going to get Brock Lesnar realistically wanting the US title. Roman, like, he may have gone back to the US title at some point after one of his world title reigns or Intercontinental Championship. But when you do that to a guy like Roman, now should never go after the US or Intercontinental titles. He should be like world champion only. Once you reach that level, it always used to be the way. Once you reach that level, you don't backpedal. You don't go back down. And if Cody doesn't win this and then he's suddenly going after the US title and feuding with Austin Theory and stuff like this, then Cody is just, he's a mid-carder for life. This is their chance. Sammy, because they've not made him the world champion here, they gave him his first real shot. I don't know if it was literally his first ever world title shot, but he didn't do it. But with what they did with Cody and Sammy, then they still have the potential that they can have Cody and Sammy. If Cody wins the championship, then Sammy can still be like, well, you gave me the pep talk. Will you now, give me the match? And he could do. And then they could decide in a few months that Sammy taking the title from Cody is the right thing, or maybe Sammy can win Money in the Bank. He doesn't need to, though. Like, I can imagine Sami Zayn going against Cody at SummerSlam, having the similar vibe to when Daniel Bryan went against John Cena at SummerSlam, and then like everyone's like cheering and there's confetti in that. And obviously there wouldn't be a Money in the Bank cash in, that wouldn't be necessary, but like Sammy could get his moment where he becomes a world champion that way. And that way you can have like, well, Sammy didn't quite do it at Mania, but then you build up to it again. I think it's harder to do that for Cody because, you can't win the Rumble and then lose. Look at Shinsuke. He won the Royal Rumble, he lost, and then, he turned heel. It was terrible, and they kind of killed him off there. He's just kind of been a mid-carder ever since. I almost feel like completely demoralized him. So having Sammy and Kevin Owens, which is the story they're clearly building into, and like even Kevin Owens must feel like, I never am going to get that world championship match at WrestleMania. Now, obviously, Kevin Owens last year got a main event match with Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was night one, not night two, and he lost to Steve Austin. But imagine being the guy that gets the return match, the return of Stone Cold Steve Austin for a match in a main event at WrestleMania. So like Kevin Owens has had his WrestleMania main event and his WrestleMania moment. But I can imagine he'd still want that world title shot at WrestleMania, or to be world champion going into WrestleMania. It's a shame just because going into WrestleMania, obviously if we have Cody and Roman, which is going to be one of the main events, obviously, it's not even really, there's not even a question over that. Cody versus Roman is the main event. The only other possibility is if Sammy was added to it. But then the other matches that are currently announced, we have Charlotte versus Rhea Ripley. We have Bianca versus Asuka. Now, for me, once again, a Royal Rumble winner should be the main event at WrestleMania. And sometimes they don't do it. I remember Sheamus won the Royal Rumble and then he defeated Daniel Bryan in 30 seconds or 4 or 7 seconds, whatever it was. And occasionally the person that wins the Royal Rumble isn't the main event. Now, obviously, they have the men and the women's Royal Rumble. To me, it's like, well, Rhea Ripley won. She should be the main event versus Charlotte. If they're going to have one of the women's matches as the main event. They didn't last year. They did the year before with Bianca and Sasha. And obviously, I don't know if they did the year before that. I don't think they did, actually, because that would have been 2020. And what was the main event of that? Brock lost to Drew. And we had Undertaker and AJ. So it didn't happen that year. And I feel that Bianca versus Asuka is probably going to be the better match. Like Charlotte versus Rhea, it will be fine. It'll be good. I'm kind of a bit like worn out of Charlotte Flair, though. I kind of don't care about Charlotte Flair being in a WrestleMania Women's Championship World Title match because it feels like she is pretty much every single year. And I'm kind of done with it. So Rhea should win that, and that's more obvious. I'm kind of more interested in Asuka because, as I've noted on the show over the last few weeks, the same year that Shinsuke won the Royal Rumble, we had the first ever Women's Royal Rumble won by Asuka, and she lost. Like, it was a terrible year for Royal Rumble winners. First year that there was 2 Royal Rumbles going into WrestleMania, other than the greatest Royal Rumble year, I guess, because there was a second one that year. But you had Asuka, and she failed to win. And then the same year that you had the first women's match main event WrestleMania with Ronda and Becky and Charlotte, who no one wanted Charlotte there once again. Asuka was the world champion, the SmackDown Women's Champion, a week or a week and a half before WrestleMania, and they were like, "Well, we wanted Charlotte in this match, so we're gonna give Charlotte Asuka's championship. We're gonna do their WrestleMania match early, and then we'll say that there's going to be a triple threat match, winner takes all, and Asuka, you don't get a rematch." So I feel like Asuka kind of deserves it. Asuka coming back, a few weeks ago, had such a good reception. I'm more interested in Asuka being in the main event. Asuka versus Bianca, I think that's more interesting. I couldn't swear who was going to win, but I'd be rooting for Asuka at this stage just because I think she's earned it. Rhea Ripley, I think, deserves to win. Interesting, though, that she's a heel, that they've just done all of this with the Judgment Day and Beth Phoenix, and then Rhea's just off to fight Charlotte Flair. Once again, it almost feels like there's some unfinished business with Rhea and Beth Phoenix, and maybe they'll just save that to, in a couple of months' time as perhaps the first match, like the pay-per-view match after WrestleMania, they'll have Rhea versus Beth. But all this said, if they don't, we've got Roman versus Cody, Rhea versus Charlotte, Bianca versus Asuka. And if they don't have one of those matches, like if one of those matches, Roman versus Cody, is going to be the main event, I almost feel like Sami and Kevin Owens versus the Usos could be a main event as well. Imagine a tag team championship match main eventing one of the nights at WrestleMania. Now, you'll never get... Now, look, you did get a tag team match main event WrestleMania back in the days of, like, Mr. T and Hulk Hogan as a team, Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Roddy Piper. That was a main event of WrestleMania. Not even tag team championships on the line. But imagine in this day and age, like AEW, they're all about tag team wrestling with the Young Bucks and blah, blah, blah. AEW have never had a tag team match main event one of the AEW pay-per-views. Now, you will remember that FTR versus the Briscoes main evented a Tony Khan promoted Ring of Honor pay-per-view. But in terms of AEW, we've never had a tag team match main event pay-per-view. It's always been the World Championship, which in a sense makes sense. But if you're going to say that the tag team championships are just as important, they are world titles, and the women's championship is a world title, then WWE is still the ones that they've had a women's match main event WrestleMania. They have now got a much more interesting tag team division in terms of the Usos seem like legitimate main eventers as a tag team. There's all of the interest and everything going into Sami Zayn. Kevin Owens was a world title contender a month ago. So Sami and Kevin as the team, which makes sense. And they were friends, they fell out. Now they can be friends again, but Kevin's kind of like turning his back on Sami somewhat. Said that on Raw this week, he was like, I only came out to help you because I didn't want your family who were in the audience to go through what my family went through when they were in the audience. And you let that happen. And like the thing is, Sami didn't quite let it happen. He let it happen to a degree, but then he was the one that somewhat stopped it from happening and then got beaten up as a result. But I think Sami and Kevin Owens versus the Usos at WrestleMania is the closest you can get to a tag team match to main event. A pay-per-view you may be able to have happen, even though it never happens. But to main event night one of a WrestleMania, I think that would be a heck of a good option. Now, I'd predicted months ago that after Crown Jewel, when Logan Paul wrestled Roman, that you could end up having the Usos versus Logan and Jake Paul. Now, maybe Jake Paul's got a fight coming up. Obviously, well, maybe there is still going to be something like this, but it does look like it's going to be Logan versus Seth at WrestleMania, and that's going to be a great match. Like, Logan is so good for no reason. There's no reason he should be this good, and Seth is always very good. Like, and so Seth is going to carry Logan Paul, who definitely does need carrying, but can do above and beyond what he needs carrying to do. And so that could steal the show at WrestleMania, because I'm pretty sure Seth is going to want to, and Logan, he wants to show why he is the big celebrity and everything, so he will get a lot of attention. And I think that match is going to probably steal the show if I was to predict that now. But there is still the possibility that if they did want to go in a different direction and they did want to have a tag team match main event WrestleMania, they could have Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Usos versus the Paul brothers. Now, the unknown intangible there is, can Jake Paul actually wrestle at all? Because Logan can, and you're like, well, if Logan can, then surely Jake can. We don't know that at all. I believe it's this weekend that Jake Paul is going against Tommy Fury boxing match, and so the outcome of that may determine how much value Jake Paul has to WWE going into WrestleMania or shortly thereafter. Because if he gets knocked out in seconds, if he gets humiliated, then maybe, you know, his appeal will go down. If I just need to give like a quite quick sidestep into the world of boxing, and just the idea of Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury, I don't know, like, because obviously, look, I'm the wrestling fan. I don't know how Jake Paul loses and then comes back. It seems like his whole brand would be like damaged by this. But like Tommy Fury, he kind of can't lose because he's a Fury. And so it's like some of these celebrity boxing matches have felt somewhat rigged. And so whether they are rigging this in any way, I don't know quite how I'd book this one. Who's to say? If you like to hear more boxing talk or mixed martial arts, UFC talk on these shows, let us know. Like if you like this stuff, then we'll do some more. But coming back, we're jumping all over the place. We've been predicting WrestleMania, skipped over a little bit of Elimination Chamber. I can't even remember what I've skipped over, but I know I didn't go over all the matches. Oh yeah, so we had Bobby Lashley, Bobby who, as Brock would say a couple of weeks ago, and Brock Lesnar. 4 minutes 45 was this match, and disqualification ending. Bobby wins, and so it's like Brock versus Bobby. Like, they've done it a few times, and it feels like we haven't got to the match, and they feel like they need to have a 15-minute match and do it super hard hitting, like lots of power moves, and like really go the distance, and maybe even like make it so that they have to go beyond their power moves and their strength, and not just like the Hurt Lock, but where they actually wrestle. And it's like, and as the commentators are into it, it's like, wow, Brock was a UFC champion, Bobby was an MMA guy as well, and they have to like start putting submission holds and stuff on each other. There's a story to be told there that they haven't told yet. Bobby Lashley versus Brock. I don't know if it's their third match or if it'd be their fourth match at WrestleMania, but instead, now MVP being involved keeps Bobby Lashley still relevant to this feud. But MVP comes out. It's like, Brock Lesnar next week. Let's find out if you want to face Omos at WrestleMania. And look, and maybe this is the sign where people are saying, look, Vince must be back. Brock Lesnar versus Omos. Maybe he's once again thinking we're going to have Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, and it will be, can Brock F5 Omos? And of course he can. Like, if he's F5 the Big Show and stuff like this. Like, John Cena had the Big Show and Edge on his shoulders at once. Like, the illusion of Hulk Hogan not being able to slam Andre is long since broken. These guys are very powerful. And if Brock versus Omos, like, I don't know what they do with that. Brock has to win. If Brock loses, and there's a thing I've seen on the net within the last few days that apparently Brock hasn't won that much since Triple H took over booking. And it's like they should be very careful to devalue Brock. Now, you do have cowboy Brock Lesnar nowadays, comes out with his ponytail. He's got his cowboy hat on, and he's doing his promos. Now, there is a reason that Paul Heyman would always do the promo for Brock. And Brock is a lot better than he used to be. The thing that always surprised me with Brock Lesnar and his promos is that Paul Heyman would always speak for him. When Brock went to the UFC, it was suddenly like he was the big fish in the small pond in terms of promos. Because coming from the world of wrestling, even if Brock wasn't a great promo in WWE, in the UFC, he was leagues above everyone else. And that's why he could rile the crowd and say stuff and have the showmanship that the other UFC guys didn't have, because he came from the world of WWE. And even though in WWE, Brock isn't the showiest guy, he definitely stood out in that respect in the UFC. And so having Omos beat Brock, that it would help Omos, maybe. I feel like they'd fumble it still. They still wouldn't be pushing Omos to be like, well, he's this unstoppable giant. And what do you do with like an unstoppable guy nowadays? Because Roman is the unstoppable guy. So Roman versus Omos, it's just like, unless you have Omos defeat Brock, so then you set up Omos as a credible threat to take on Roman later. But this only works if Roman is going to keep the championship long term. And again, we've been saying this the last few weeks. I'm not against the idea of Roman Reigns being the world champion for years to come. Look, let's find out, in fact. So this is the annoying thing. You go onto the Wikipedia page, Undisputed WWE Universal Championship. It's not its own championship. They may say undisputed, but it is just the combination of both of the other titles. So let's go on to WWE Championship. And I can check the Universal Championship as well. But we're gonna find out how long, like, the longest reigns are. So brand designation, there's the history. Let's see the reigns. So list of WWE champions, and let's see if it's got longest reign ever. So this is, how do I find this? So Buddy Rogers, his days as champion, 36, but it says it was recognized for 22. That's gutting for the first world champion. Bruno, 2,803 days. I mean, that is insane. When Roman has just done like 900 days, when you consider that at 2,803, only 100 days ago, it was like, oh, Roman, you've caught up to Bruno's record in another 2,000 days. So that's over 3 times like what he's currently at, like 900, 1,700, 2,600. Look at me doing my 9 times table here, or my 900 times table. Now, a lot of the early reigns, Ivan Koloff, 21 days. Pedro Morales was 1,027 days. And during that reign, it was renamed the WWF Championship. Oh, how about that? Bob Backlund, 2,135 days. Bob Backlund has a reign which, again, unless it's Roman, is not going to be beaten. Like, Roman is the only one that can take over these people. Bruno Sammartino, 1,237 days. Now, Roman would have to keep it essentially like 900 days, so it's like 300 days plus, and that would take it up to 1,200. So effectively, Roman still has to be world champion in 1 year's time to overtake Bruno Sammartino's second reign as the champion. And if you were to add Bruno's first and second reigns together, which you can do, you don't necessarily need to, but it would be 3,000, 4,000 days as world champion. Now, if you add up what else that's, let's have a look here. Oh, hang on. So here's one interesting thing. On the Bob Backlund reign, it kind of doesn't recognize the Antonio Inoki reign, so I don't know if they count that. No, so that doesn't separate the Bob Backlund reigns. Iron Sheik, famous world champion. Look at this. Iron Sheik. Guys, you're not on the show tonight, but here we have the miniature Iron Sheik, who would have, he's my co-host tonight because none of you guys are here. But Iron Sheik, 28 days as world champion. This is why winning the world champion, you don't need to be world champion for long, but once you've been world champion, you've been world champion. The only ones where they've really fumbled it is someone like Jack Swagger, who it almost feels like doesn't count at all that he was world champion, but he was still world champion. Jinder Mahal feels like he was a joke as a world champion, but it's because these things kind of fizzled out and then they made them not look like world championship material, because then they're suddenly back in the mid card. Whereas the Iron Sheik, it's always, former world champion. Like Dolph Ziggler, if they have him doing goofy nonsense, then you kind of forget that he's been world champion. But Iron Sheik, always former world champion, the one that, Hulk Hogan defeated. And then look, Hulk Hogan, 1,474 days. So for Roman to overtake that, it's like another year and a half. I'm not against Roman doing this. I think it can be done. I think it should be done. Like even the statistic that Gunther has been Intercontinental Champion like longer than The Rock, and this was like in 1998 or 1999, that you have to go that far back to see someone that's held the Intercontinental title as long as Gunther have, and it was The Rock. It's like, do you know what? Leave this belt on Gunther. Let him overtake Honky Tonk Man. Do you want it to be forever that the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion in history is the Honky Tonk Man? Now, I've got nothing against the Honky Tonk Man, but if it's like the longest reigning anything, it was like in 1978. Let's look when Bruno was world champion for 2,000 days. Oh, wow. It wasn't even like he was world champion in 73, but the first reign, the longest one, he won it in May 1963, lost it in January 1971. And look, that length of time from 63 to 71 is 8 years. Imagine, like, if Roman's held it over 2 years now, you have like another 6 years with Roman Reigns as the world champion. Now, the funny thing about that is by the time it gets to the 5th year, you'd know, well, they're clearly going to leave it on him just to beat Bruno. And they could do that. It's up to them. Now, let's have a quick look, because all of the reigns after this, Andre the Giant, less than 1 day. Ted DiBiase, it doesn't count. I always believe they should make that count. Some of these championship reigns that they say don't count, I think should count. Randy Savage, over a year. Hogan, 364 days. Unbelievable. Lost to the Warrior, 293 days. Slaughter, 64 days. So on and so forth. But from here, the next, like Hulk Hogan losing to The Undertaker, 248 days. And after that, loads of them, Flair, Bret Hart, Yokozuna had it for quite a while, 280 days. Bret Hart, 248 days. Diesel, 358 days. And that was like a year almost with Diesel as world champion. But in this period, Shawn Michaels, 231 days. Like, it took such a long time before someone was truly a long reigning world champion. Because look, Mankind, 15 days. The Rock, 41 days. Austin, 56 days. Now, people say, yeah, this is because Russo was booking during this time. So, of course, all the titles would change constantly, because look what happened to WCW. 118 days, Triple H. So Triple H was perhaps the one that started to change things here. The Rock, 119 days. So when you add up like Steve Austin or The Rock's world championship reigns, they really weren't world champion for long. But you look back and like The Rock, he was like 6-time world champion or something. And it's like, yeah, but how many days overall was he world champion? Chris Jericho, 98 days. Triple H, 35 days, lost to Hogan for 28 days. I know I'm just going through this now, but it's kind of fascinating. Kurt Angle, 105 days. So we have gone, this is up to year 2003. And since about 1991, no one's held it for a year. John Cena, 280 days. Equaling, actually, just above it, Bradshaw, 280 days. And then you go down, John Cena in 2006 to 2007, 380 days. First one to go over a year in 15 years. That's insane. And then things started to change. Wait, did I? Oh, yeah. So 280 days was Bradshaw. So not even the Triple H reigns were all that long. They'd find someone for him to lose it to. But we scroll down more. The Miz held it for 160 days. I remember that felt quite long, but it's really not that long when you consider people have held it for 2,800 days. Alberto was 49. CM Punk, 434 days. Now, the thing that's a shame about that, because I remember when Punk had it, they were sort of saying like where he's moving up on the ranks of being longest reigning world champion. He lost it to The Rock, and then The Rock held it for 70 days. So, you know, if Cena had kept it going into WrestleMania, sorry, not Cena, if CM Punk had kept it going into WrestleMania to have the three-way or whatever, then you could have added those 70 days on. That would have been 500 days for CM Punk. So it was a shame it didn't happen. What was I going to say? So after those 400 plus days of CM Punk, then did things start to change more? No, Orton 161 days, Seth 221 days. Like some of these as well, they're just so short. 180 days Kofi. Drew was 203 days during the pandemic. And then he lost it to Orton for 22 days and won it back for 97 days. So still wouldn't have even been a year if that was uninterrupted. And then here we are, Roman Reigns, it says 325 days, which is less than 1 year. So if he loses at Mania, the World Championship, he'll have had for less than 1 year. But the important thing is that he's also the Universal Champion. So let's just see what they've done with that. First champion, Finn Balor, dislocated his shoulder and had to vacate it after 1 day. And then Kevin Owens, 188 days. Brock Lesnar, 503 days. So that they did do a very long reign there, and that was 2017 to 2018. And Brock, 156 days. And then again, Braun, 141 days. Bray Wyatt, 6 days. Wow. And then Roman, 906 days and counting. So I think that's something they can keep going. 906 days as Universal Champion. Find a way to separate the world titles. Big E was the world champion. He was injured. They gave the championship to Brock, and then they thought, right, we're going to do a title unification because clearly this wasn't our plan, because their plan must have featured Big E, and then it had to be changed, and they ended up putting both belts on Roman because they were railroaded into it. The Usos have started to defend the belts separately. If they get rid of Adam Pearce or bring in like someone, like it's a shame to make Roman a face because he's so good as a heel, but you kind of need like a heel general manager to say, look, I'm going to do something to make sure that you lose those belts. You're going to start defending the championship separately. You're going to defend them both on the same night because we've got a pay-per-view coming up, so you've got to defend the world title. It's like, fine, I will do. And then you've got to defend the Universal title. And he's like, so he'll win the first match, perhaps defending the Universal title, and then he'd inevitably probably lose the Universal title, the world title thereafter. So anyway, there's some of my thoughts. I don't know, like I've moved so far away from whatever we'd got with Elimination Chamber. I don't know if there was any other matches I didn't cover. Raw, obviously we had Edge going for this was the other thing, I mentioned this earlier. Edge going for the US title in Canada. They were still in Canada. And after they had Sammy lose in Canada, they had Edge lose in Canada. It's like, this is Vince McMahon booking. This is why there's going to be these rumors. So what else did we have? We had Baron Corbin going against Sammy. Now, thank God with the stuff with Kevin Owens, because the whole stuff with Baron Corbin immediately after Sammy loses is just telling the audience, hey, we don't care about Sammy at all. But let's not worry so much about that. Let's talk a little bit AEW. We're also going to see if there's any breaking news during the course of this show. And let's have a look. Oh, apparently, I don't know if something is saying that. Oh, no, it's clickbait. It is clickbait saying about I'm not even going to bring it up. Let's not give them the clickbait reward. But AEW Dynamite this week. Tony Khan's big announcement, announced by Adam Cole, baby, right, etc., was that there is going to be a show after AEW. So I thought the show after AEW was Power Slap, and I read something saying that Power Slap's ratings had gone down to from 2.7 million for episode 2. I don't know if that's more or less than whatever episode 1 was, but now it's at 100,000, and that is a massive drop in 5 weeks. That is so much worse than even Rampage, which had 1 million and is now at 200, 300,000. But after Dynamite, so maybe Power Slap comes to an end for this season, then they'll bring it back in a few months or next year or whatever. But after Dynamite, there is going to be AEW All Access, and it's going to be a behind-the-scenes look at things. And it might be interesting. I think Impact, when Bischoff was there, had some sort of behind-the-scenes show after the show, which no one watched. And obviously, we had WWE backstage. But AEW All Access, after you've watched 2 hours of wrestling, do you then want to see them out of character? Which is my fear that is going to be what they're going to do. I think less is more. When AEW Rampage first debuted, the first week wasn't the CM Punk debut. The first week, I'm trying to remember what they had. It was when Fuego del Sol failed to beat Wardlow or someone, and then was given a contract, and it was a feel-good moment, even though it didn't make sense. And I forget, there was a women's championship match. I forget who was in it. And then you had Christian defeating Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship. And then that was the show. It was an hour with 3 matches. And it was wow, all of that kind of meant something. And it felt like a good show. An hour-long wrestling show isn't a bad thing. Now, obviously, if you have 3 singles matches, that's 6 wrestlers you get on the show. 2 hours does allow you to get a lot more in. And I understand that. And you can't build up a roster and have everyone care about everyone if you only have a 1-hour show a week. But having watched back some of the old Raws, some of the old Nitros, having just an hour of wrestling, sometimes it's refreshing. When the NWA Power Show first started and it all felt a bit low budget and very retro, it was cool. Now, I haven't watched as much of it recently just because I somewhat fell out of watching it when they went to subscription. Now they might be back on YouTube. I'm not even sure, to be honest. But AEW Rampage being an hour is this is exciting. Then you watch AEW Dynamite, and when that was first a thing, it was wow, this is different. The presentation's different. The wrestlers are different. But now it just feels like each week it's somewhat predictable. And now the idea of watching a third hour of AEW on the same night. Now, being in the UK, I watch it on Fight TV, the Fight app, as they call it. And I hardly ever see it on ITV because it comes on a Friday, and I've already seen it by that point. So I don't know that they'll show this on ITV at all. But whether they show it on Fight or not, I've no idea. It feels like it should be in the AEW Plus subscription that you pay for. But it's just am I going to want to watch just the behind the scenes stuff? It's obviously you get a lot of this kind of programming on WWE Network, but it feels like this is something they should save for YouTube. There's Being the Elite, which is the behind the scenes, and it's obviously that's extremely low budget and kind of goofy, but it is what it is. And if they wanted to do a higher production version of that, I feel like YouTube is the place. They do the Road to Dynamite or the Road to Revolution or whatever. Excuse me. But yeah, so then the other big things from Dynamite, we had Jon Moxley not his 100th match, he got his 100th win. And this weird statistic was that his first match and his first win in AEW was against Joey Janela, and his 100th win in AEW is against Evil Uno. And look, maybe they're all big fans or great friends with Evil Uno, but when you say that, oh wow, from imagine you put together the DVD or the documentary, Jon Moxley 100 wins So it's not like the streak, because he has lost in between, but for 100 wins from Joey Janela to Evil Uno. How did he get the 100 wins? It's like, well, he's wrestling Evil Uno. Of course he gets 100 wins if that's the level of his competition. If it was from wrestling Kenny Omega to wrestling Bryan Danielson, you're like, well, yeah, that's like tough competition. If it's like, you know, defeating MJF and Wardlow and Keith Lee and like some big tough guys and Cesaro and, or Claudio, as I should say, but yeah, it just feels like the 100 wins weren't quite as big a deal as they should be, if that's the level of competition. Obviously, it was interesting. Moxley, you know, what the hell? Like, I turned my head for like 1 second, and suddenly Evil Uno, a guy in a mask, is bleeding, and I think that rarely happens. So I don't know if he juiced or whatever, but there was gushing with blood. And then he refused to like release the headlock after the match, and the Dark Order ran out, Hangman ran out, and so it's interesting what they're doing with Moxley like that. I don't think it makes sense to turn Moxley heel. Like, keep him as a babyface. Is he going to come out to Wild Thing as a heel? You're going to get him some new music? Because to be honest, you kind of should do anyway. It doesn't quite do it for me. What else happened on Dynamite? Saraya wrestled, I can't remember who, but anyway, so we had the tag team like over the top rope battle royal, and Jeff Jarrett was the winner. Now maybe they're being kindly to Jarrett because obviously Jerry Jarrett passed away a week or so ago, and also Jeff was in WWE. Ric Flair's last match. He's coming with a little bit of hype around him. But, you know, he's one of the older guys, and it feels like if he's the one also booking the live events, and then you have Billy Gunn, who's got this impeccable win-loss record in AEW, and he's one of the coaches. And you have Jeff Jarrett, who, look, these are all friends of Road Dogg as well, so who's to say what the weird influence there is. But then you have Jeff Jarrett, and he's like booking the live events, and then he just wins and stuff like this as well. It's like, then you have MJF. Now, obviously, they did what they did with Hangman and Moxley in the main event. It's like you have MJF and Bryan Danielson come out in the middle of the event, and it's just like, I don't feel like they're making me believe that MJF is the world champion at the level that you'd hope him to be. It doesn't feel as big a deal. I'm still hoping that somehow Punk will come back. But we'll deal with that another time. There's stuff to suggest that Punk may come back. I've always believed it's a work because, if nothing else, the pay-per-view All Out was at Chicago, and they were like, how can we run this at Chicago and sell out if Punk's injured and he's not back? So Punk was probably like, look, I can come back for one match. Injured himself anyway, but, you know, who knows? Like, perhaps it was a plan for him to disappear off, recover a bit more. But we'll find out. Right. Anyway, so with that, on this note, I'm going to wrap things up here. Let's see if we do have something from the Iron Sheik, just because that is kind of the way we do things around here. So we're going to get any late breaking news from the Iron Sheik. The most recent update from the Iron Sheik. Let's have a look. I break the Cocaine Bear's effing neck. So that is from the Iron Sheik. Until next time, stay safe, always stay extreme, keep slamming and jamming. Go and subscribe at www.youtube.com/@Slam Jam Wrestling Show. That would be awesome. Let's see if I can even put up a banner to tell you where to do that. Look, well, it tells you to do that, and I haven't put it actually on there with the link. But you see, that's where you need what you need to do. Do that, guys. We also have Slam Jam Wrestling Show, Slam Jam Show on Twitter. And we do have a Twitch channel, but, you know, need to make sure we're streaming to that, which we weren't today. And also, we are on Instagram. We have a Facebook page. You can watch this on Facebook. You can watch this on Instagram. Until next time, ciao for now. Boom!